Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Family Couch. Today I am so happy to have with us one awesome dad, Eric Greene. He is literally an awesome dad, and I'm happy for him to be here with us today. And we'll be talking about peaceful parenting and how it can actually be done in a really effective and authentic way. So Eric, thank you so much for being on with us today.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. I'm super excited to be on the show with you.
So Eric, for our audience, can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I am a dad who developed a passion for treating children with respect and dignity.
Nice.
And
Nice.
That's my byline right there.
I love it.
You know, I'm not a coach. I do some consulting online. I run a Facebook group that's gotten pretty popular called Peaceful Parenting Community. And what I advocate for is peaceful parenting.
Yes.
But ultimately, I'm just a dad. I'm a dad I have a 6-year-old son. And my life changed when he was born. I started reading about peaceful parenting, and I always knew that I didn't feel good about spanking, but there was a lot of the more radical ideas, such as not punishing, not doing timeouts, and that kind of thing. That took me a little bit, I think, to get on board. But like I say, I developed a passion for it, and I started reading. I started, doing courses and watching YouTube videos, and I developed a Facebook page called One Awesome Dad, and that became sort of the person that I've become known as is One Awesome Dad with that, and I developed a Facebook group called Peaceful Parenting Community, and which is now about 12,000 members.
Wow.
So a lot of parents who come and they're just, they're looking for advice. They want the best for their kids, and they're looking for tools, and they're leaving behind the old authoritarian conventional practices. And I think, for most parents that join this group, the light bulb has gone on. Okay, I don't want to spank. I don't want to, I don't want to be that authoritarian, tough love kind of parent.
Right.
So the second question is, what else? What do I do? What do I do? So that's hope. That the hope is that this group helps parents in that regard, and so far it really has.
Yeah. And that's how I kind of came to you through your One Awesome Dad work and things like that. And one of the things that I've always admired about you, I think, is that in this field of parenting, we tend to focus on moms a lot in their work. Yeah. But I love that as a dad, you're like, hey, we're over here too, and we can do this peaceful parenting thing as well. So tell us a little bit more about how that looks as a dad, because in our culture, dads tend to be the disciplinarian one, right? They tend to be the ones who are like, tough love, make you a man, and you have a son.
Right.
So that's another, layer, right? So tell us more about how your paternal kind of male energy kind of becomes part of this peaceful parenting community or movement that you're about.
So like I said, I started this page, One Awesome Dad, a few years ago, and I didn't come to it really from a perspective of, I'm a dad and I'm going to share things from a dad's perspective. I just came at it as I'm a parent, and I want to share my parents' perspective, right? And but I think lately I'm starting to notice that I do kind of stand out a little bit as a male advocating for gentle parenting, conscious parenting, peaceful parenting.
Yes.
And so, I would like to be able to reach more dads with this, because I think there is kind of a, that dominant male culture of, teach your kids to, or teach your boys especially, you don't cry, that you use tough love and you spank and punishment, and that's what really toughens them up, and you raise them to be a man that way. And maybe for me, I don't know, I go back and try to analyze it, and I ask myself, how do I, sort of break out of that mold? And I think maybe for me, I just look back and I see that tough love didn't work for me. Tough love didn't make me tough. Tough love made me very well, there was a lot of shame involved in, in my childhood. Shaming, punishing, spanking, and I feel like it didn't make me tough. It made me very confused in life, and I had a difficult time standing up for myself because of I mean, there's a number of factors, but one of them I think that was very strong for me was the tough love, was the shaming, and a lot of punishing. And so, like I said in the intro there, that I really developed a passion for advocating for children to be treated with respect and dignity is what it comes down to.
Right.
All right.
And so can you just talk to us a little bit about what peaceful parenting is? Because I think there sometimes is this misconception that peaceful parenting is kind of synonymous with permissive parenting and, doing no limit setting, no discipline. And sometimes I know that some families can kind of be turned off by that because they want to teach their children limits. And so peaceful parenting is something that they sometimes are like, oh, I'm not so sure of. So can you tell us what it actually is so we can demystify it a bit?
So I think the main thing is that, I mean, it's peaceful, so therefore it doesn't involve any hitting, whatsoever. No spanking, no little pop on the behind or slapping or any of that. So there's the nonviolence factor.
Right.
So once you remove that, then the question is, okay, then what do I do in place of it?
Right.
And so there are skills, I would say, or there are principles that you can develop and sort of adjust your way of parenting to live by these principles. And for me, they are principles are connection. Spend a lot of time connecting with your child. The more connection you have with your child, the better time you are going to have as a parent when it comes to time to ask them to put on their shoes and get out the door,
right?
Or to brush their teeth, or to or to get to bed, or whatever it is. So the stronger connection that you have as a parent, and that's it's not a linear kind of thing, right? So just because you're completely connected, you're going to have those moments when your child doesn't want to do what you're asking them to do. So
definitely.
So then the next principle involves, so what do you do in those moments? And for me, what has almost always worked is to empathize with the way that my son feels in those moments. So instead of battling against him and getting into a back and forth, it's time to brush your teeth. I don't want to brush my teeth. Well, you have to brush your teeth or you're going to get cavities. Well, I don't want to do it. Well, and it can become that way in any number of situations where you're battling, where you're arguing. And instead of that, you can just say, I know you don't want to. I know you were just playing. You were playing with your. You need 5 more minutes. Right. And then maybe he'll say no again, and you say, I know, it's really hard, isn't it? And then you give him a little more time. And 9 times out of 10, that kind of empathy will work.
Yes.
It will work. Eventually, he'll come around and say, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Another principle with peaceful parenting for me is trust. And so trust is really tough for parents. It's been tough for me, So trust comes in when you have a situation with maybe your child is hitting a lot or biting, and they're in that phase around 3 years old, maybe 4 years old, where they're kicking or hitting as a way of showing their upset or showing their frustration. And so the idea of trust comes in where you just trust that your child is going through a phase where they're testing this, hitting or biting or whatever the reason is. Maybe they discovered that a bite really got someone's attention, when they were around the age of 3. And so they continue that. And so what you do in that situation as a peaceful parent would be to talk to them and tell them, we don't bite.
Yeah.
I can't let you bite, right? Or I can't let you hit. You may need to physically restrain them, but their response is not to hit them back or to bite them back, because then you're just teaching that hitting back or using violence is the way that you solve problems. So where trust comes into play is that, you may show them that one time or you may talk to them that one time, we don't hit. And then maybe the next day they hit again. And then you talk to them again, you empathize, and you say, we don't do that. And then they do it again the next day, and then the next day, and then you start to say, okay, this isn't working. I got to do something else, right? So where trust comes into play is that you just trust that they are going to get this, right? And that this is just a phase of testing the boundaries with you. And eventually they will move on.
And as you talk about these principles, the connection, the empathy, the trust, I feel like there's an underlying principle there, which is patience. I feel like that's a huge underlying principle with this, because as you're dealing with kids, again, younger kids have those type of hitting behaviors. Maybe, older kids begin to maybe talk back a little bit and maybe not want to listen as much. It feels like there's a lot of patience involved, especially on the caregiver's part, to say, I'm going to work with my kid through this, as opposed to try to nip it in the bud, so to speak.
Right. And there really is, sometimes I look at peaceful parenting, I think peaceful parenting can be hard. Because especially if you weren't raised with this kind of parenting, if you were raised with the authoritarian, if you're getting triggered by the behaviors that your child is involved with. So patience is a big one. I call that a skill, actually, right? And so what can you do to develop that skill is a huge it's a big topic. I ran a poll recently in Peaceful Parenting community, in which I asked, what are your top struggles as a parent? And I made a big list. My child's hitting, there's defiance, co-parenting issues, self-regulation. And by far, the number one thing was self-regulation. That's the biggest struggle. Is how am I, how can I keep myself calm, keep myself patient, keep myself loving and understanding? And that's where the work really is on you, the parent. And that can be really tough, because a lot of times we want that quick fix with our child. We want them to get off the couch, or not throw things in the house, or to hit their brother, or whatever it is. But the more patient that you can be, the more effective a lot of these techniques are.
And as you're talking about peaceful parenting, it actually sounds like what you're doing as a peaceful parent is really preparing your child for healthy, authentic human relationships, really. Because we have to have that same level of patience with everyone in our life, with our co-parent, with our family members. It sounds like that's kind of, and I want to go back to that idea that you say peaceful parenting is about respecting the child, but I really think it's about this idea of respecting us as humans. Your child is a human, you are a human, right? And would you say that that's kind of one of those kind of overarching ideas of peaceful parenting, that it's really about respecting your child's humanness, that they're not going to get things right all the time, and neither are you?
Right, definitely. Right, respecting your child's humanness. I think for a lot of us, there is a tendency to kind of look down on children as, kind of a second-class status in the home. You do what we say because we're the parent, and and a lot of times there's good justification for that. But if on a human-to-human level, if you can see your child as having just the same basic wants and desires and needs as anybody else, for me, that's where it starts. And I would say that kind of going hand in hand with that is modeling is another principle with peaceful parenting. So you want to model the behavior that you would like your children to develop, but I think you also want to model that kind of that kind of empathetic, loving,
Yeah.
understanding
Yeah.
relationships with others that you would like your children to develop too.
Right. Right. And so for the parent who's listening, right, they're thinking, all right, this all sounds really nice, but Eric, you
Right.
don't know my kid. My kid is just, I can be patient, I can be loving, and he's still going to push those boundaries. What kind of encouragement do you have for that parent who's really kind of struggling with some of these behaviors and is trying to maybe be a peaceful parent because they've read too and they understand that the
Right.
research says we've got to change the way we discipline our children, but they're still like just sitting in kind of this rut with their child.
Right. Right. And a lot of times, I mean, that does go back to trust. Trusting your child is going to pick up the things that you're trying to teach them. And that, if you're connecting and if you're talking to your child and you're saying we don't do that. I mean, you've given them the message, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think where the difficulty can often come in is that children are also going to test those boundaries a little bit, right?
Yes.
They want to see, are you serious about this,
Yes.
or not? And I think if you're consistent with that boundary, and if you're consistent with saying, that we don't do that, then I think you're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing with peaceful parenting is that there are a lot of principles here. There's connection, there's empathizing, there's patience, there's self-regulation, there's trust, and you kind of got to have all those ingredients together, right?
Yes.
You can't just get into this and, today I'm going to try empathy,
right?
And leave everything else off the table.
Right.
It's so, and it can be hard.
Right.
It can be really hard. And if you're making a transition to peaceful parenting from a previous background or a previous history of maybe spanking or maybe more conventional, authoritarian, tough love kinds of measures, I think extra patience is actually going to be required because there's going to be a time, there's going to be a transition period where a lot of those previous kind of expectations and habits that maybe have previously developed are going to take some time to transition out of.
Right. Right. And one thing, as you were talking about peaceful parenting, that's come up for me, and I do, I talk a lot about ending parent shame. I think sometimes that kind of can impede a parent in doing this work, this peaceful parenting work, because society says, control your child, don't make them out to be bad. If they come out bad, it's your fault.
Right.
And so I find out that parents are really sometimes not able to do peaceful parenting as efficiently because they're worried that they're going to have a bad kid, whatever that means, whatever society deems the bad kid. And they don't want to be the parent with that child. So what do you say to that parent who's crushed under that weight of trying to match what society is saying, but then also saying, I really like what you're talking to me about with peaceful parenting?
Right, right. For me, that's where I say, come join my group. Honestly, the group has got over 12,000 members now. There's a ton of support. So many parents are in there, and they say, "Look, I'm the only one in my family that's trying this. I'm trying to be peaceful, but I've got a mother-in-law, or I've got my own mother is telling me, you've got to spank, you've got to punish, you've got to do this. Your child is going to be raised to be spoiled and entitled, all these kinds of things." And so I think, whether you're joining my group or whatever it is, I say reach out. Wherever it is, reach out for support from others where you can feel comfortable just venting sometimes, venting or just asking advice. What do I do in this situation?
And I think that's really good advice, because I think in parenting, you need a tribe anyway, because you are going to need those spaces to vent and not kind of take it out on your family, but to say, this is hard, and to know that there are other people there with you. And I can definitely attest to having family members who, like having people in your life who are like, you got to do it this way. This is the way we always did it. There's this huge issue now in our culture about millennial kids being spoiled and entitled. So parents are constantly battling that idea that I don't want my kid to be spoiled. And I can see them feeling like peaceful parenting is spoiling a kid. But what I love that you're saying is like, no, let's get into a community where we talk about this. We talk about how difficult it is. We talk about how hard it is, but we don't let go of
Right.
the practice of it.
Right.
Right.
Right. So for me, the idea of a spoiled, entitled child is more about kind of a bad attitude,
Mm.
So for me, worrying about if my son is spoiled and entitled, and for me, in many ways, I would like my son to feel entitled. I want him to feel like he has the right to be treated with respect from others. Is that an entitlement?
I
Maybe,
like it
I
though.
don't know. Yeah.
But I like it though. I like that concept of, there are, I think entitlement and spoiled kind of have these nasty connotations in our world where you don't want your kid to be like Veruca Salt, from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? You don't want him to be that way, but you definitely want your kid, like you said, and I love that piece of, I want my child to feel entitled. I want them to feel like they deserve to be respected. They deserve to be loved, and these things that we do, I think most parents want for their children. But I think sometimes, again, and I'm sure you can talk about this, but sometimes you're caught between a rock and a hard place as a parent, where it's like, I want my kid to feel love, but I don't want them to manipulate me into, doing certain things, or I want them to feel respected, but I don't want them to walk all over me.
Right.
So how does that look in a peaceful parenting kind of household where you want this love and this respect to come from your child, but you don't want them to use those two things to kind of get their way or walk all over you? Is that something you see, or what do you think?
So peaceful parenting really is not permissive parenting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just setting the same limits and boundaries that you want to set in any other parenting approach.
Right.
But just without the spanking, without the shaming or punishing,
mm-hmm.
or any kind of, it's the removal of any kind of mistreatment. Ultimately, is what I would say.
Yeah.
For me, spanking and punishing, even, I would argue, is a mistreatment, because what you're teaching when you're punishing or spanking or threatening or shaming is you're teaching that the way to solve problems is to make the other person suffer in some way.
Wow.
And so when we have this idea that the only way children or anybody learns is by making them suffer, if we can change that paradigm, right, to maybe this idea that maybe it doesn't have to involve suffering.
Right.
Maybe we can just pass on these values through connection, empathizing, understanding, being respectful, and showing that your child has an equal voice in the home, and all these kinds of things. But getting back to the point, so peaceful parenting is not permissive parenting. We are setting boundaries in the home. It's not like we're just hands off, and it's very involved, because the big piece of it really is the connection. So I'm spending my commitment is to spend at least 10 minutes a day with my son, one-on-one, no phone. And not only just removing the phone and spending the one-on-one time with him, but it's really one-on time where I'm not even a parent.
Yeah.
I'm just with him for at least 10 minutes a day. We're talking, maybe we're acting silly with each other. Maybe we're doing hide and seek in the house, or we're doing a set of Legos or whatever it is.
Right.
So it's really comes down to the connection is just huge. Right.
And I love that piece. I love that you say that it's about, you do set limits, but you also bring that connection piece, because I think, again, going back to that human piece, when we connect to other humans, we're more likely to stop and listen than when we're disconnected from them. And I feel like that happens in all human relationships, with the other co-parent, with other family members. When you're so disconnected, listening to them is hard because you're not attuned to who they are. Right. So I feel like as a peaceful parent, that's what you're doing. You're using that connection to really get in tune with who your kid is. Right. And if I can kind of link ideas, I think that connection helps build trust. If I know that my kid is just having a hard time, I'm not feeling like I need to punish them. I'm feeling like, okay, I know my kid. My kid tends to listen and do what he's supposed to do. But today, we got up on the wrong side of the bed, or today he just, is having a really hard day. That actually helps you to feel more connected. Like, you're like, all right, I can help him. Right? This is not something that we're dealing with every day. I can help him. Right.
And oftentimes, when you're empathizing and showing him, oh, I see you're having a hard day, aren't you?
Yeah.
right? Well, maybe we can put off this thing until another time, or, or whatever it is, sometimes bending those rules like that, can it's okay to do that sometimes,
I
right?
agree. I agree.
Um,
I definitely agree. And I think that we all need that. I think, again, when we go back to this idea of respecting the child as a human, I think it allows us to say, okay, we all need that. There are times when we can all go, 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 go. But I think for the most part, we all need that break from our to-do list and our commitments and all that stuff. Because, I think even if you think about you and I as adults, going, going, going makes us crappy people sometimes. And we have really bad days where we just run, run out of all of our energy. We're at the end of our line there. And I feel like kids probably have a lower tolerance for that than we do, right? They get to the end of their line really quickly, right?
Right. For me, what I like to tell parents is that I have raised my own son, and he's 6 years old now. Yeah. We still got a ways to go, but he's 6, and he's never been punished, or we don't spank, we don't do timeouts.
Right.
We left all those conventional authoritarian sort of approaches behind, and he's just fine.
Yeah.
He's really just fine. When it's time to get out the house and go do something and put on your shoes. Most of the time, sometimes there'll be some dragging of the feet.
Right.
But, most of the time, my point is to say he's not, any better or worse off than any other kid. Right. It's not like I have this spoiled, screaming brat throwing things, in the house, because that's the argument that you hear against, peaceful parenting, that if you don't have the spanking and the punishing, then you're going to get a spoiled brat on your hands, is what the argument is. And I just want to say, no, that's not the case. It's really not the case, and I don't like putting my son up as an example, for the kind of the peaceful parenting example, because he's his own person, and he's got his own, he's got his own life ahead of him, his own personality. So I hate to hold him up and say, see, that's going to put a lot of pressure on him too. I think that's all. So I don't mean to say, I just mean to say that the spanking and punishing and shaming is it's not necessary.
Right. Oh. And I love that you share that, though, because I think there is the argument that if you don't do these things, then you're going to have a spoiled child. And what I hear is that you have a human child. You have a child that has his moments where, yes, some days he can get up and go. And then there's some days when you might have to give him a little bit more space and give him a little bit more empathy, because he doesn't want to put his shoes on, or he doesn't want to leave the park because you guys have had such a great time. He really like to just stay, and these things are, I feel like they're common human issues. They're not spoiled child, brat child issues. They're human issues where we all kind of have to learn how to navigate. You said self-regulation was one of those things that all of your parents in your group tend to deal with. I think, again, kids are doing the same thing. They're trying to self-regulate. How do I deal with disappointment? How do I deal with fear? How do I deal with my anger? Right. And it sounds like peaceful parenting gives them a healthy space to explore those emotions, so they're not getting punished for them.
Exactly.
But they're getting support through them. Am I getting the right concept down?
Right. And so I think that's where empathy is the other huge key in peaceful parenting. So when you are setting that limit, it's time to put the tablet away, or it's time to leave the park. Those two things have been those have been struggles with my son. Leaving the park in particular, we love to go out to the park, and then it's time to go, and oh no, I don't want to go. And so there's where a key principle of peaceful parenting can come into play. So instead of battling and arguing, but it's time to go, but you've already had 20 more minutes, but we've been here for 3 hours, but we come here every day. It's so easy to get into that kind of combative kind of argument, and instead just drop all that and say, I know. It's so tough. It's tough to leave, isn't it? I know you love to play that game, don't you? That's your favorite game. So there are some kind of techniques that you can use, I think, involved with not just empathizing. But one thing that you can say if you have to take a tablet away is you can say something like, I bet when you're an adult, you're going to play the tablet. You're going to be on that tablet all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are some kind of techniques that you can use to kind of fill in the gaps there when you're empathizing, and because it's difficult.
Yes.
It's hard to empathize when someone is screaming at you, no, I don't, I don't want to leave. I don't, I want my tablet, I want to play the game, So that goes into the working on your own self-regulation.
I agree. Right? I agree. And Eric, I know we could talk about this topic, forever, but I definitely want to give you a space to share more about how people can connect with you and how they can kind of join in on this peaceful parenting movement that you are awesome at facilitating and being a leader of.
Great. So, sure. Thanks so much, Mercedes. I enjoyed talking with you. One Awesome Dad is the website. It's the number one awesomedad.com. Facebook.com/OneAwesomeDad is my page, and the group, look it up at Peaceful Parenting Community.
Nice.
And users or your listeners may like to know that I will be finishing an ebook soon called "Transitioning to Peaceful Parenting."
Nice.
So a book written with really the beginner in mind.
Yeah.
For parents who have, I would say, the light bulb has gone off. Right. I want to get into this. I want to leave the spanking behind and the yelling and all that. I want to try this, but I don't know how.
Yes.
This is hard. Yes. Where do I start?
Yes.
So Transitioning to Peaceful Parenting, my first ebook is going to be coming out soon.
That's awesome.
I'm excited about that. So if you go to oneawesomedad.com and sign up for my newsletter there, I'll let you know about that.
Awesome. And for those of you who were listening, don't fret if you weren't able to get all those links down. They will all be in the show notes, so you can, peruse them at your leisure and connect with Eric at a later date when you're listening, or when you just feel like, I'm ready to do this peaceful parenting thing. I'm really excited about the ebook too. So when, hopefully by the time the episode airs, it'll be out. But I really, really commend Eric for what he does, and that's why I had him on the show, because I feel like peaceful parenting kind of gets a bad rap sometimes, and I love being able to have people like Eric on who are compassionate about it and who are doing it. You're not just talking about it, you're doing it. So thank you so much for being on and sharing your expertise and letting us know about how we can connect with you.
Yes, thank you so much, Mercedes. So grateful. So glad to be on with you.
Awesome. See ya.
See ya.